Hey, everyone.
How is Skip doing today? Oh, this is getting good. We're getting all kinds of people here. That's great. You want your stakeholders involved. Plus, we'll be taping this so everybody can watch it and learn about the project. So we'll wait a couple more minutes to see, make sure everybody can get on.
Hi, Catherine. This is Chris from MCI. How are you?
I'm just peachy. How are you doing today? I haven't talked to you in a while. It's been hectic everywhere.
It's been kind of a crazy year, huh?
I haven't talked to you in a while. It's been hectic everywhere.
It's been kind of a crazy year, huh?
It has been. We learn all kinds of new skills and learn how to be more efficient when you deal with adversity.
For sure. Well, nice to see you again.
Yes, good. Thank you. You too. So we're going to wait a couple more minutes so that we'll get people on and not having constant dinging here. But this is a good number of people and a very interesting project here. So we'll get you in and out because we know that your time is valuable.
I like the palm trees and the ocean.
Yes, I know. I saw that. The tree, the palm tree looks really good. Much
Thumbs
better than
up.
the office.
Jeez.
It almost felt
I wish
warm
we
enough today.
were, right?
Palm trees.
I think it was a balmy 50 today, wasn't it? Almost there.
Warmer tomorrow.
Brenda, I wish those palm trees were real, but unfortunately not.
That would be nice.
So, it can be.
At least the weather's getting better, which is good. All right, I'm going to start the meeting. We're going to be recording it. So welcome to the Pittsfield Main Street Sidewalk Informational Session. This is a stakeholder meeting, but it's available to everyone, and we are taping the meeting so anyone can watch it later on. The session's being recorded, so that will be helpful for people. So we wanted to thank you for joining the Town of Pittsfield and Haley Ward, formerly CES, our project engineer on the Main Street project. Chip Haskell is here with us this evening. He's our project manager. And we have a Councilor Hall here, as well as planning board members, Pittsfield Economic Expansion Corporation members, individuals, headmaster, and board of directors from Maine Central Institute and other interested parties. So this is good. And we have people watching us at home on the town hall stream. So we've got quite a number of people doing that too. So we're going to ask that all the microphones be muted unless somebody's going to speak, which is the way you're set up, which looks really good. When we get to the interactive portion of the agenda, Chip has asked that you use the raise hand feature if you can, but if you don't want to, just raise your hand and we'll recognize you. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss, I'm going to click somebody on here right now, is to discuss the proposed sidewalk improvements project for the downtown of Pittsfield. And gaining input from the stakeholders is critical to having a good project, a very good project. So I'm going to be providing a quick background on this project and then turn the meeting over to Chip, who's going to go through the nuts and bolts of the project, including the scope of the project, and open up discussion on how the sidewalk is going to be configured, the type of materials, and other items of interest. And so on the Main Street Sidewalk project, the town sidewalk along Main Street, as we know, has needed repairs for many years. With the anticipated cost, the town's project was well beyond the means that we had available to us. So we were very fortunate when Chimbro purchased the Tech Center on Honeywell Avenue from the Pittsfield Economic Expansion Corporation, because at that point, they created the wonderful Chimbro Institute, but they also created a number of jobs. And with those jobs, the town was allowed by the Department of Economic and Community Development to apply for an economic development grant that we normally would not have been available to the town. So after applying for the project and utilizing the jobs from the Chimbro Institute, we were awarded $250,000 in funding for the Main Street project. For the sidewalk, and that had to be matched 50%. So we have $250,000 that was dedicated by the town councilors from our economic development fund. So that pretty much is the end of the money in that account. And then we went through and did all the state and federal requirements, and we're all set to go. The sidewalk project will start at the Main Street intersection with Somerset Avenue. It will extend down through the businesses on the west side of Pittsfield, so by Pop-On Overs, Vittles, past the railroad tracks, by the Pittsfield Public Library, Maine Central Institute, and then based upon bidding prices, we want to go to the back of the industrial park by Hancock Lumber and reconstruct the sidewalk that goes down over the hill. So it's important for us to also mention the Main Street DOT project, because that is crucial to the sidewalk project. It's crucial that the sidewalk project fit into the work that the Maine Department of Transportation is going to do. And that work has been constantly evolving over a number of years. Maine DOT had planned on paving the Main Street area in the downtown, just doing the 2 lanes, no shoulder work, no other work. And so that was a project that was estimated to be around $500,000 a number of years ago, what we would call the Main Street DOT project. So that started out as a small project and now has become a major project that has been expanded on both sides of the downtown. It's been expanded down on the southerly area down towards South Main Street, approximately 0.38 miles, so that they could utilize the correct paving, because they couldn't hook on the type of paving they were going to use for those lanes because there's an area that it wouldn't work well with. The northerly limit up by Madawaska Road was extended approximately 0.47 miles because the town was fortunate enough to receive a large state revolving loan and grant program funding of over $1 million so that we could fix the water main going up toward Grove Hill. This water main, and no exaggeration, had 27 bands on it. And we were fortunate each time we could fix it, but it was a huge project and we qualified for no interest loan. And so as many people know on your large loans, if you have 0 interest, you're paying about approximately half of what you would have paid if you had to borrow it at an interest rate. So we jumped on that, but it did require that pavement would have to be put down by Maine DOT. So they plan to do that the next year. The project then grew to $734,000 for the road work. So that was good. Then DOT found a significant number of drainage issues on the southern part of the project. They also found that there were significant drainage issues going on and the stormwater drainage area needed to be fixed on the road. So the project just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So Maine DOT will be reconstructing, paving shoulders and adding or replacing drainage on the northerly end of the project. So that's up toward the hospital. The middle of the project is going to remain as a pavement preservation part. So that's in the downtown area. And then the southern part is going to have significant drainage. So this little project that was $500,000 for road work is now approximately a $4 million project and growing. Hopefully, we'll be able to get the supplemental funding. Maine DOT believes that they will be able to do that. So they'll have significant funding to move forward on the Main Street Road project next year. The town did receive a commitment letter from Maine DOT that's been forwarded to the state for our sidewalk project so we can get an extension. So the Maine DOT has an extensive new schedule, and I'm just going to mention 3 dates because I think that'll be important for you to know about. There will be a virtual public involvement, a public meeting virtually between the dates approximately of March 22nd to April 2nd. There will be a 2-week online presentation with opportunity to comment on the state's project. And we'll make sure we advertise and help the state with that so everybody knows about it. The state will be advertising the Main Street Road project approximately April 26, 2022, next year. Construction is anticipated to begin around June 7th, 2022, and then construction would be completed around July 1st, 2023. So this is an important schedule, not only for the Main Street Road project, but because it affects the town sidewalk project, which must be done in conjunction with the road project. We can't go out and do a little sidewalk project and throw it in. You have to mesh everything together so we can have a beautiful downtown and a beautiful Main Street and not have problems that towns or state would have when project parts are done separately. So the main topic this evening is what we're getting to, which is the little downtown area, which Chip Haskell is going to walk us through. The state has taken over, at least in putting in the plans, the rest of the sidewalk project going from the railroad tracks down toward Nichols Street. We can ask questions about that. If anyone has questions, I'm going to track those tonight. If you have questions on the road project, I'll track those for Maine DOT. But the purpose of our discussion this evening is to walk through the downtown area, which is very hard to plan for. It's very congested. We have to make sure it's done perfectly right, because this is a main project to transform our downtown. So I'll be tracking all that. Thank you very much. And I'll turn the meeting over to Chip Haskell, who will talk about the downtown area.
All right, thank you very much, Catherine. Hi, everyone. I'm Chip Haskell. I'm a project manager with Haley Ward Engineers up here in Bangor. I think Catherine set the table pretty well there, and it's a pretty good segue here. So, but yeah, as just to kind of expand on that a little bit, we were initially brought in to do the sidewalk, design and bidding and process and all that for the whole extent of the overall project. As DOT's design really expanded, it became clear that it was really better off for their engineer to sort of take over the sidewalk design portion of that for the majority of that length. Reason being there really is they found out that there were some historical concerns with the Maine Historic Preservation Commission through a lot of that portion of roadway, and it really went hand in hand with the design of that road. So really our side of the scope of this really is now just the downtown portion. With that said, we're certainly here to help with sort of reviewing anything like that in the town's interest for the remainder of that as well. So again, so that's sort of our scope here. And really the purpose of the meeting tonight is really to focus, as Kathy said, on the downtown, understand sort of what everybody's goals are in that area. And so that we can move forward now into our sort of concept phase for that area and really try to capture those goals of all the stakeholders here. So that's really critical at this point, is to try to understand, we'll go through tonight talking about the overall configuration of the downtown sidewalks. Do we want bump outs, for instance? Do we want to change around crosswalks? Do we want it raised? If we do want bump outs, do we want them raised, or do they want to be flush? What sort of materials do we want to talk about, in the sidewalk itself? What kind of curbing, lighting, landscaping, hardscaping, meaning benches or bike racks? It goes on and on. So just kind of wanted to talk about that and what some of the goals here are. So at this point, I guess that kind of hits on the introductions, the background, really the scope of our project. And we'll be bringing together a set of plans here that will be bid out simultaneously with the DOT's project. It'll be inserted in as part of the, just really the sidewalk for downtown. It'll be ideally constructed by the same contractor. That way there's no battles back and forth there. So, unfortunately, the DOT's timeline on their project is quite lengthy. As Catherine laid out for you, it's looking like a bid time frame of sometime April in 2022. So we've got, I guess the good news is we have plenty of time to really design the downtown portion here. So I guess with that, I'll kind of move into the configuration here and get your input on that. So we've pulled together just really a base plan, and it's based on the survey that the DOT has completed in that area. So Catherine, I don't know if I can share my screen. Let me just, yep, I can.
Yeah, I set it up so you could.
Perfect. Let me just do that. All right, can everyone see that okay? All right, so this hopefully looks a little bit familiar. Here's Somerset, main road here. This is the block of buildings here in downtown. We just don't have the sidelines for a lot of these, but most of them are connected for the most part anyway. Obviously the railroad tracks, Veterans Park. So what you're seeing here is kind of this heavy line is the proposed curb line. It matches existing for the most part here. So we do, you can see those bump outs we were talking about. You can see the parking that exists currently. The lights are these symbols here. The traffic lights for the opposing roadway over here. And the roadway striping, you see all that. And maybe you can see the trees and things like that. So in general, I mean, we're not looking to, the road through here for DOT isn't really changing a whole lot elevationally or horizontally. They're really going to reconstruct this thing, and for the most part, we're pretty well fixed, frankly. Obviously, these buildings aren't moving, and we have to maintain certain slopes in that sidewalk to meet ADA requirements. So really sort of fixed on these on the elevation of that sidewalk, and this road has been designed. It appears to meet those requirements. In some instances, well, we may have to kind of play with that a little bit to potentially have to have like an esplanade that catches up the slope, but I think we haven't quite got to that point yet. So you'll see these sections right here are crosswalks. There's a few of those that show up throughout here. Obviously here up at Somerset, there as well. So I guess what I'd at this point, we have all the options available to us at this point. I think let's sort of start here and look at this sidewalk. I mean, what do folks envision for configuration? Let's say I can give you a little bit of background on why these bump outs are I believe here in the first place. We do have these crosswalks, and there is a state or I should say a sort of a rule. Basically, you can't have a parking space within a certain distance of these crosswalks. So you really couldn't gain a parking spot here by getting rid of the bump out. So there's that, and I suspect that was one of the main reasons for those bump outs. Otherwise, you just end up striping these spaces and they can't be used. So it can be, the downfalls of those are it's a snow removal, difficulty. There's no question. Added maintenance. If we went with a brick type sidewalk, more surface is more maintenance. So there's pros and cons obviously with anything here, but what do folks feel about these bump outs? I mean, we can look at having bump outs here, and they could be flush with the road and striped differently. We could have them gently raised. There are a number of options here, so I guess I'll throw it out to the group here now.
About the bump out up at the top there, the radius of it. Sometimes tractor trailer trucks coming around, making the right corner, sweep up on top of that curbing.
Oh, this one here?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I can see why. Yeah, without getting into oncoming traffic, sure. Okay.
I think this is Mike Gray. I think Brent has a good point there, and I think when some of those trucks have come around there, they've actually hit the streetlight area as well and done some damage there. My concern is when you get down to Honeywell on that bump out and, trying to figure the scale, but that bump out to me makes no sense whatsoever. And
This one here.
correct. And wouldn't you be able to gain at least 2, maybe 3 without infringing on that sidewalk or crosswalk? Does that make any sense or no?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you could theoretically have some spaces here. I'll look into the only caveat I'll have to that, I guess, is whether there's any regulations on having parking directly across the street from the intersection like that. I just need to verify. I'm not aware of anything like that, but that would be the only thing I can think of. That, and where do you put the traffic lights at that point?
I mean, aren't we going to be faced with moving those traffic lights when you get working on the sidewalks and the roadway anyway?
They'll have to move, but the benefit of keeping a bump out, I suppose, is that the location for them, could be put there. I suppose if you take that bump out away, I'm not sure where, without going, overhead,
or in the
'Cause-
middle of the sidewalk. I get it.
Yeah, that's the only thought, but I mean, absolutely. I agree that that bump out is probably overly large at the very least. So that's a interesting comment.
Are we entertaining, or have we looked into whether those lights are required? I know that came up before, where they are, or if it's just a single suspended blinking light rather than a full, a full light tower.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I honestly don't know. Catherine, is that, well, anybody here? I'm guessing that's not a state road coming into that. It would be something we should certainly bring up with the DOT.
So those are all state roads. I did contact DOT regarding the requirements of signal lights because they are older ones. And as we discussed at a prior council meeting, we actually had requested that those be taken out and new lights be put in when the Somerset Main Street intersection was done. DOT did go down and have those tested by a qualified electrician and said that everything worked perfectly. And then the next week, things blew out. And then we had issues off and on since then. So that is on our list. I did contact DOT. I haven't heard back yet. So I'm going to
Okay.
track all of these items and we'll ask for answers to them. I was going to mention quickly on the bump outs, Chip, in one of the meetings that we were at, the contractor that DOT turned the plans over to for the remainder of Main Street sidewalk going along with the Main Street Road project indicated that if we took the bump outs out, we would lose more parking spaces. And that was up at the beginning by Somerset Avenue, Main Street. And I think that should be checked into by us just to see, what are the requirements, just as you said.
Yeah, I think we need to look into this a little bit more dimensionally. But this is an interesting area. I mean, the bump outs serve a purpose in protecting the vehicles, that are sort of behind it, right? Both from turning traffic and oncoming traffic. So that there are, like I said, there are certainly benefits, but I think we have to evaluate whether or not they're there. And what I'm, I guess, gleaning from the few folks that have spoken up so far is that we're not really in favor of the bump out so far. Is that fair to say?
I think that one there is almost necessary for the turning traffic,
too.
right? The one down in front of Rennie's there, the only thing if you're trying to enhance downtown and you're trying to, looking at ambiance and there's something to be said for having space where, as a busy Saturday in the summer and people are out from store to store, that is a narrow sidewalk and you do tend to see a lot of people gathering there and socializing, and that's just something to consider, right?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. Something I was going to bring up is that there's a lot you can do with that space as well. If you wanted to, it sort of depends on what your goals are here. If this is an area you want folks to kind of congregate in,
You have planter boxes and benches or something like that.
Exactly. Benches, planter boxes, even tables, or potentially bike racks, or things like that you may want to sort of promote. Those can be certainly good spaces to do that. I'll also throw out, obviously, given what we're in the midst of right now, if you certainly have some restaurants in there, the potential for outdoor dining also is certainly helped by a larger sidewalk. There's no question.
Yeah,
this is Gary Jordan. When you go back to Upper Main Street there with that bump out, I think that bump out, really needs to be there. And the only reason I say that is because it really does protect the people that are coming, across that street. Those vehicles tend to stay away from that. Trucks do hit that. We've seen that over the years, taking out, poles and things of that nature, and those lights stay blinking for, an eternity, it seems like, after that. And that's the same in the center down there too. When you're coming down Main Street, if you're new to town, all of a sudden you see that bump out kind of just narrows the road real quick.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what the solution there is, but it does narrow it, and those lights down there tend to flash a lot. You know?
You're talking these ones here or up at Somerset?
Yeah, these ones right where you're pointing. Those
Okay.
lights have flashed for a very long time in a lot of cases.
Okay.
I don't know if there's ever been any accidents on that intersection there, but certainly when you're coming down, you know, and if you're new to town, all of a sudden that road narrows right there quick.
Yeah.
And that's right in front of the theater, obviously. So, but I think the top bump out's kind of, you know, to keep trucks off that, you know, and keep it, you know, them away from pedestrians there. I think that's kind of a safety issue, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty good practice in general on a intersection point like that to have some sort of protection there for either vehicles or pedestrians.
What do you normally see? I mean, you've done this before. What do you normally see towns do in those kind of cases? You know, I mean, the whole sidewalk, you know what the condition of that is, but
Yeah.
what are you seeing for newer materials being used on sidewalks that are attractive and long lasting?
For materials, I mean, concrete is always, you know, it's really attractive in that regard. If it's if it's done right, it tends to last longer than the pavement for sure. And I don't know, I haven't had the best luck with pavers. You know, if it's brick or whatever kind of pavers, unless you put, even if you do, but the best way to do it, the only real way to do it correctly is to pave first and then build up your pavers on top of that. So you have a base that is really, you know, not going to move quite as much. That tends to be expensive, and obviously it's more, yeah, maybe it looks better than concrete. But there are ways you can stamp concrete, you can stain concrete, should you decide you wanted to do that. I think you're gleaning. I'm certainly a proponent of concrete in that regard. And I think it looks good too if you do end up going with like a nice granite curb or something in that area. It really has a good curb appeal, so to speak, right? So, but that is absolutely another area that I certainly want to discuss tonight. But I guess, I mean, not to get too far off topic, I guess, but I mean, it is in general. I know we've spoken with, you know, the public works crews, and you know, they certainly have concerns with the bump outs, and I think there's things we can do to make it more appealing from a plowing standpoint. I think we could probably make, maybe those aren't a vertical curb in that area. Maybe we have a sloped curb or something, so that they can plow up over the top of it. You know, there's ways that, and we'll have to work with them on that. But I don't know, from my perspective, if you have the room in the road, bump outs buy you a lot of flexibility in the sidewalk area, provided that they're not too much of a headache for ongoing maintenance.
You really have a lot of flexibility if for some reason those light the light indicators go away, or they become a suspended blinking light. There's nothing to say that if you're tearing this whole thing up, that bump out doesn't move up the street or down the street a little bit, or shorten or expand, or you really have a lot of flexibility right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can see a pretty good case, frankly, for shifting this bump out, you know, towards Somerset anyway, and maybe reorienting this crosswalk a little bit, just so you have the protection. See, the problem with having a crosswalk here is if you have a car parked here, folks can't see this person trying to cross the road. That's the benefit of having these bump outs and that separation between that crosswalk and the sort of stacked cars in front and behind. So I can certainly see an instance where we would try to provide a little bit of a safety buffer on that crosswalk one way or the other.
Well, DOT is going to have a final say on regardless of what we do, right? Or what we recommend.
Yeah, they have, you know, this all certainly needs to meet DOT standards.
Right.
I think from the sidewalk standpoint, Kathy, you probably have a better feel for what their input, I guess, on this is.
Yes, basically, what we have now is certainly approved by the Maine Department of Transportation. The sidewalk is on the state road within the state right of way, so whatever we propose would need to be approved by Maine DOT. We've got a pretty good design now, but the bump outs can have some changes to them that would be helpful. There's some other items along the roadway that could be helpful. And DOT has actually indicated that they would fix a few items on the other side of the sidewalk for us. So that is very good too. So this will be a cooperative project.
Okay. So any other thoughts on the bump outs? I mean, is this something that we should try to promote, I guess, where possible, or while still sort of, appeasing Public Works and making this, workable?
So Chip, we've got two people that put their reactions up. We've got first our Mayor Heather Donahue and then Councillor Hall. So why don't we start with Heather because she had her hand up first.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Chip. Thanks for doing this again tonight for us. I had a question just about, I guess it's generally a general question about sidewalk design and whether our downtown, we need to be thinking more about traffic calming and whether those bump outs play more of an important role in that respect, or whether we want to really be thinking about the experience of the person walking on the street and looking at it from more of a safety point of view, and whether those bump outs have a more valuable role in providing safety for the pedestrians. But I do like your point about the fact that the wider the sidewalk can be, the better, the more flexible for our businesses. And also it just gives more space in there so that if we did want to do some type of flower planters or benches or some type of little seating, thing like that, that would be more inviting to get people to come and sit on downtown. How do we think about that and incorporate all of these things as far as the design and the practicality of it?
Right. Well, I think to your first point, I mean, traffic calming is certainly, it really goes hand in hand. And that's another benefit of these bump outs, right? I mean, as another gentleman said, as you come into downtown, that really does narrow up, and that's the feel that is intended in a lot of cases by these bump outs. It's to slow you down, to be on the lookout. That is intentional. To some extent, you can overdo it, absolutely, but they want folks to be on the lookout. Now, whether that bump out is, in that case, these bump outs can be co-utilized, for other features like you were just talking about. So I think you can, certainly the benefit of these is they serve both pedestrians and, it does calm traffic in that area. Also in the interest of pedestrians, frankly. But it also, serves as like you said, room for the downtown. So, I think they have their place in downtowns. Absolutely. You'll see them a lot for that reason. And I think the only real downfall of them is just not planning in regards to maintenance, for plowing and things like that. So there are, we'll definitely want to coordinate with, Public Works on that and get their input on this, see what we might be able to do to make that a little bit easier for them. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure if I hit every point.
It did. No, it did. And I guess I just want to add too that Rockland has some really nice plantings and benches and trees, and has really it makes the downtown look very inviting and very pedestrian friendly because there is some shade to walk underneath and to stand and walk, like Ben was talking about, to encourage people to stand on the sidewalk. And it also has the advantage of having a one-way street going on it. But on the flip side of that, it is very hard to find parking down there. And that could be just because their streets are a little narrower, and they just don't have space for that on-street parking as much. But definitely I kind of look at that as a model of, how can we make our downtown area kind of our living room and invite people to spend time in it.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think, there's a lot there, and you do see a lot of these downtowns that are moving into that model. There's certainly no question. I look at a Gunkwood and areas like that. I can think of several off the top of my head, but you're right. It turns into some traction. It's an area that feels inviting. It invites people there and to stay there. And there are a lot of things you can do to do that, and space is key to all of those things, right? The trees, while great and inviting, obviously has inherent problems with plowing again, right? I mean, so every one of these has things like that are potentially problematic, but there are ways around that. I mean, obviously planter boxes, you can take them out in the winter. You could even do tree sort of planters with trees in them if you wanted to, and take those out in the winter. If you want to develop more mature trees, that's something you're not going to be able to do in that regard, but without actually planting them in the bump outs here. But certainly all things to think about. How far do you want to take it? And it's really just a trade-off, frankly.
All right, thank you, Heather. Councillor Hall had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I like the idea of shifting that towards Somerset Ave. I know that it does get narrow there because that turns into 2 lanes right there. And that's kind of the problem, like Gary was talking about. If somebody's shifted over a little bit, then you're compensating for that and coming really close to that bump out. If we shift that up and maybe make it a little smaller, although we, like we just said, we want more bump outs or want to encourage people to stand at those. But if we shift it towards Somerset Ave, it might get away from kind of the congestion of those 2 lanes right there. Although you would have to shift it quite a ways. But yeah, maybe shifting it and then and see about the street lights and see if those can either go away or like Ben said, maybe have them hanging above the street and not necessarily on the sidewalk.
Yep.
And then one other thing to consider is those bump outs. I think right now they're red brick. Once we get into like material, that'd be something to consider too, is if we want to stick with that or go in a different direction. But I know all of those are red brick at the moment. So
okay, yeah, excellent. I agree. I think certainly if we do want to look at shifting that, definitely need to consider traffic in that area. We don't want to condense that to a point that it's problematic, for sure.
And then shifting it up also, we have the restaurants there, so that does kind of benefit them, shifting towards them and away from Rennie's.
Sure.
Just something to think about. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Mandy Smith has her hand up.
Hi there. I just had a quick couple questions regarding the bump out and the calming of traffic kind of along that again. And I apologize because I'm not in Pittsfield all the time, but I work for Bangor Savings, and so I'm kind of like across the street from the businesses on that side. But I wondered if by the railroad tracks that crosswalk there, is there an issue with people coming like across the railroad tracks and like big trucks and whatnot and coming fast? Like, is there lights there at that crosswalk that would alert people to slow down that it's a crosswalk there? Like, how you see like the blinking lights sometimes on a sign showing it's a crosswalk?
Yeah, no, it's another thing that we could certainly look at implementing. A lot of municipalities, as you say, are switching on these heavily used crosswalks or crosswalks that are less visible to to folks. Certainly in this case, if you've got higher speeds kind of coming into downtown, that's a good
Right.
case for one of those, which are pedestrian actuated lights. So they're not necessarily a dedicated signal that's just going all the time, but pedestrian actuated, hit the
Yeah.
button and everything starts blinking.
Right.
That would probably be a good location to consider something like that. And it serves kind of another purpose, obviously, as well. Kind of alerting folks that you're coming into downtown. Let's slow her down. So.
And one other quick thing on that bump out, like across from, I forget the name of the road, right there by Chimbro, across, like right in front of Rennie's.
Yep.
Honeywell, sorry. Is that a three-way like street light, or are those like crosswalk lights that you have in there?
These ones here?
Yeah.
Those are traffic lights, and actually.
Okay.
And probably.
So somebody has to stop coming up from the railroad tracks coming up to Somerset?
No, I'm sorry. I say that. I don't. Let's see here. Maybe. I'm sorry. I'm sure everybody on this call, or a lot of people on this call, probably have the answer offhand. Let me just.
I didn't recall that, so I wasn't sure.
So there is a traffic light facing each direction.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or at least back in August of 2011, there was. I assume that's still present.
They haven't done anything but blink in 15 years, but
okay,
they're there.
Yeah, I didn't remember them having a stoplight there, like coming down Main Street. That's all.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, that's all I had.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else before I'll switch over to kind of excuse me, materials and whatnot?
Yeah, can I add, this is Mark LaGrosse. Can I add just a couple things in there?
Certainly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, on that, those bump outs, thought just came to me, and instead of using curb, don't they have, some type of posts, removable posts and such that could be decorative through there that meet the standard instead of using curb in the sense of that's a little more decorative. I missed what your discussion was about the blinking lights there, if they were going to go away versus staying there in the future or not. So that was just a suggestion. Instead of having curb there, having some type of less prudent type of, bollard of some sort standing, through that area that's maybe a little more decorative than curbing.
Yep. Go ahead.
And then you were talking about the sidewalk. Yeah, that sidewalk there, I'm talking adjacent to right in front of Rennie's, or right in front of the barber shop there. Yeah, I mean, I think the real place of point of a pedestrian access is right there where your hand is right there at the center of that bump out, and moving the sidewalk at an angle to the other side, to both sides there, towards the Chimbro parking lot, towards Bangor Savings Bank, that way, and the other way too. Yeah, the other way towards Bangor Savings Bank too. Yeah, and have one point come in there with a ADA ramp right there. I think that may make things more congested, I guess, in opinions, but I think pedestrian movement wise, people would feel a little more safer about how to, kind of maneuver themselves from the Bangor Savings Bank over to Chimbro and such.
Something we can certainly look at.
I don't know if that's a calmer situation in the big sidewalk assessment.
Sure. something to look at. I mean, as kind of reconfiguring crosswalks. Typically, it's not a super good practice to have kind of two crosswalks. Doing that. The kicker, what happens there in this case, is you're in the middle of the intersection, so any pedestrian effectively kills any movements in the entire intersection at that point. If you have
Yeah, that's
if
a
they're
good
both
point.
sort of starting here.
Yeah.
You do end up really kind of having the potential, depending on how it's signalized, to really kind of freeze things up. And the other kicker there is, it's typically good to have crosswalks near where you have the stop bars. So you can still see the lights and things like that when a vehicle is coming through here and hits the stop bar. They know. That's why you typically see a crosswalk right nearby.
So you're making the assumption that those lights are going to stay with the new configuration.
They may not, and I think if they go away, regardless, I think it's more typical to have multiple crosswalks in a situation like this.
Yep.
I see where you're going with it as far as kind of bringing it to a central point, because it does minimize the size of this bump out, and it makes it frankly easier for a pedestrian to move around. From a vehicular standpoint, it does pose some problems, but it's something we can certainly look into.
Yeah. And then is the intent to keep those existing trees, or was that discussed before I came on?
Oh, out along the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I guess that's anything's up for discussion. We have not touched on that one yet. So.
Oh, you haven't?
No, we did talk about potentially implementing some additional street trees. That was a suggestion earlier on, but I don't think that anything that is being done by the DOT, from what I can tell, would require those trees to go.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, I
Yeah.
guess what are people's thoughts on those trees?
I mean, myself, just to continue, I mean, I think the trees, vegetation up through there is extremely important. It does relax pedestrian movement. But I think it has, those trees and the sidewalk has, done something, to, I guess, the use of the sidewalk, I mean, the sidewalk themselves, in the sense of the cracking and the defects that occurred. I think those trees have made it, happen faster, maybe. I don't know, but like the one up by Papa and Overs there, that one's cut down. That one's not there anymore. So I mean, I guess that tree configuration would definitely, I think, would want to be looked at, and probably that's just a matter of how the new the light fixtures will be arranged down through there, to calm things.
Okay.
So that's just my thought. I mean, I guess there's really only one on that side now, I think.
Okay. That
one's gone.
This one.
I know that much. And then that one's there.
So it's really just the one, like you said.
Just that one. Yeah, I guess that is. Yeah.
I think you could accomplish a lot of the greenery with your planters, even if there are small trees in the planters. And if you do bring in a tree, you would probably need to look at getting it into the bump out where there's a little more room to bond it out, so it doesn't spoil your concrete as it grows. And
Exactly.
Be very selective about the type of tree you plant. You want a deep rooting tree versus a tree that's going to root close to the surface and break your concrete stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was just I guess my thought.
Yep.
So.
No, I mean, greenery is, I think, certainly important for to get that feel of an inviting kind of, pedestrian friendly area. You want that. But, these ones are definitely getting very mature, and I can absolutely see how those are doing damage to the sidewalk, if not probably some buildings, frankly, in some of those cases. So they have their place, and I think there's, a lot of times in some of these downtowns, that's what I've been seeing more of, is these smaller sort of street trees that have been planted. And to Ben's point, careful selection of species is really key in that regard.
So I would note briefly that we have talked internally about these trees. They have damaged the sidewalk and some of them have already been taken out. So we do need to seriously look at them. The greenery is important. So as Ben said, any trees that are planted in a vegetation plan have to be slow growers and ones that the limbs will not go under the sidewalk and then under the buildings too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So I guess I'm gonna, unless there's anything else, I'm gonna skip over to starting to kind of shift into materials here. I think we already just briefly touched on it, but I mean, we do have, I guess, materials open to us. Are the typical ones are typical asphalt. Would be potentially some brick type pavers. You could do concrete pavers, or you could do cast in place concrete. For the most of that sidewalk you have there now is cast in place concrete, with the exception of those bump outs, which are a brick paver. So I mean, obviously the sidewalk there is certainly seen better days in certain places. I mean, any material you put in there is going to move. There's no question. But I guess what are folks' thoughts here on that?
If I may, Ruth, Mark LaGrosse.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think the concrete and granite curbing up through there, definitely as longevity, and the granite curbing giving it a decorative look, to the extent it would. And, ADA ramps will be in there too. I guess we haven't talked about those that much, but those would be implemented in. That would give a different configuration, but I think definitely go with 4,000 PSI concrete with granite curbing up through there would be my vote.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously looking at these, there's really no tip downs or nothing too structured in that regard. So, we'd be looking at doing tip downs with, the truncated domes on the ends, things like that.
You got all the buzzwords.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think if granite curbing seemed to be priced out of the thing, I think that the slip form curbing up through there, you can get some decorative molds that could shape in through there and show some good calm radiuses. I've seen those happen at places, but that may be too much concrete for some people.
Yep.
That's existing granite curb there now, right?
Well, that was actually a good question. I was
Yeah, you just
wondering
reset
the same
it.
thing.
Yeah, you
So
just reset the granite curb, and
Right.
what I would do is,
what kind of shape is it in? Does anyone know?
Well, I think
Granite
No
is
one
pretty
knows,
resilient.
everybody knows, but definitely, like Brent says, it really needs to be reset.
it's
think you'd find
got that antique look, which is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You want to talk from a durability and a maintenance standpoint, it's going to hold up a lot better than any slip
Yes.
form is going to, especially if your plows are ramming into it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What I would recommend is bid it with bituminous pavement for the sidewalk and doing an alternate for concrete.
Oh, there you go.
Yep, we do that a lot. Absolutely.
That's what I would
Yeah,
recommend.
probably that pavement, probably the reason that the curb isn't even revealing anything. There's probably 6 or 7 overlays on that
That's
pavement.
right.
That's absolutely what's happened. I'm
Yeah.
sure that used to be a 6-inch reveal, and she's been picked up over the years. So, okay, yeah, I think it'd certainly be good to reutilize that where possible. Obviously, some of that gets beat up, and I would anticipate we may have to replace some of it, but sounds like it. I mean, folks think it's in decent enough shape to salvage, which is great to hear. So.
Certainly from longevity standpoint and an economic standpoint, the poured concrete sounds like the best route. It's easiest to take care of, easiest to repair if there is an issue. Aesthetically, though, the brick really has a nice feel to it, and it is more welcoming than just concrete upon concrete. I don't know if it's practical to have like a mixed sidewalk, maybe have bricks along the side with concrete down the middle, if that creates all kinds of problems with heaving and whatnot, because it's not really all excuse me, connected together. Or maybe being able to have like brick at the crosswalks to delineate those crosswalks a little bit more as people are walking down the street, and make it stand out more as for the traffic as well.
Sure. No, it absolutely is a great point. I mean, there's no question that, aesthetically speaking, a paver certainly has appeal that poured concrete doesn't. Anytime you do anytime you make a joint between materials, you're going to introduce the possibility of or just increased maintenance and really shorter life cycle in that regard. It's not saying it doesn't happen. It happens everywhere. You've got decorative brick patterns within concrete sidewalks, or however, any configuration you can think of. It happens. You maintain it. It's something you deal with because it's the look you want, right? So there are absolutely pros and cons with it, just like all of this. Another alternative that we could maybe look at is stamped concrete. You can go down through there and actually stamp a pattern into that concrete to resemble brick or concrete pavers. You can actually even you can tint the concrete rather than painting it. I wouldn't recommend painting it; it's just going to peel off. But you can actually tint the concrete in the batch and create a color to it too.
But with a stamped or pavers, you get into maintenance issues like with snow removal, right?
With pavers, absolutely.
Absolutely. You need stamped concrete. I mean, it takes more to clean the surface. It takes more salt or whatever to make the surface bare.
Yeah, I mean, stamped concrete is better because it doesn't, it's just on the surface, but absolutely it becomes an irregular surface at that point, which is absolutely harder to remove material on. So unfortunately, it's one of those kind of inherent trade-offs between aesthetics and functionality. So.
All right, we had some people that had their hands up and I don't see them up now. I see Mandy's got her hand up again. Did you have any comments?
Sorry, I don't know why it's still up. I don't know how to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We had Ben Hall had his hand up and Jason had their hand up. Did you have any other comments or did the questions get answered?
I know Mr. Vigil was trying to jump in there and he was having a hard time getting his hand up there. So I was trying to throw to him,
All right, good. Pete Vigil, did you have any comments that you'd like to make?
I've tried to speak earlier, but to no avail. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, very clear.
Wonderful. So I'd just like to remind people that what you see in this picture in terms of the sidewalk, the trees, the bump outs, all of it are 40 years old.
Mhm.
And that's a reasonable lifespan considering everything.
Mhm.
And also, if you study some of this concrete in the sidewalk itself, there's examples of how it's deteriorated because of the salt application, which is an issue. And then, of course, you've got the issue with the joints, and you can see in this picture where the concrete is spalled because of the way it was plowed and handled. And that's not a good thing. The one point I think that's necessary is Heather made comments about the attractiveness of this community. And Main Street is the center point of this community with people coming here. A lot more activity in town today than there was when this work was done. And I think the importance of attractiveness is key and should be a major consideration of the type of materials we use, the kind of light standards and poles, not hanging, but the posts themselves. And again, the other thing that was brought up earlier was the granite curb. That's far more durable than slip-on concrete or asphalt. And considering that curbing is 40 years old, it's not in bad shape. It's very durable. And that should be part of the consideration, is not only the attractiveness, but the durability in everything we do. The trees that were there before they were cut were quite handsome, I believe. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough space allocated for those individual trees, so that created a lot of heaving of the sidewalk in some areas. So I think the placement and location of those trees are important, but at the same time, they make downtown far more attractive. And hopefully in the coming years, our downtown improves in a significant way in light of the growth that we're taking on currently. So I would align my thoughts with the comments that were made by Heather earlier.
Very good. Thank you. Great comments.
You know,
Peter, what are your thoughts on a stamped concrete or versus a paver in that regard for the surface of the sidewalk?
I have been exposed to it. It's attractive if it's done right.
Yep.
Quality of the concrete is important for sure. The coloring could add value to it. And but again, remember that we're going to have to saw cut joints.
Yes.
And to prevent the cracking and spalling of the concrete. But it's very popular, and as long as it's maintained well, it will last. The other thing about the maintenance, our sidewalks haven't been maintained from the perspective of any kind of a sealer since they were built in the early 80s. And so, you know, a sealer can prevent a lot of salt damage and make it a little more attractive, especially if there's some coloration in the concrete.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments before Chip goes to the next subject?
Rather than take a step backwards here, Chip, that video or that picture that you're showing now with the little walkthrough with the greenery next to the SVH building and pop-on overs, is it possible to reduce the number of sidewalk crossings we have and have a crossing go there to provide direct access to the municipal parking lot instead of having two sidewalks right next to each other on really on either side of that intersection?
So basically have one, is it right here or?
I think
That's
right about
right here.
there. Yeah, there seems to be a street light there. I don't know if we can move the street light so it wouldn't be in the middle of the crosswalk, but it seems like it's very congested to have two crosswalks directly at a busy intersection there.
Yeah.
Is it possible to move them?
Yeah, I
And
think,
bump up, down
you know,
with it?
shifting this crosswalk, the kicker that we want to make sure we're considering is, and if maybe it's not a problem, but again, is the street lights. I'm sorry, the traffic lights. Rather having some place for those. If those go overhead, that changes that, or if they go away altogether, that really changes that. But yeah, I think unless there's, you know, you could certainly have this crosswalk here be further up. It's not ideal, frankly, because you do want the ability for vehicles to stop here, and having a crosswalk in a queuing area is typically not a really a good practice. I don't know how much traffic, I guess, comes out of Honeywell. Is that a pretty heavily used intersection?
Yes.
It is. Yeah. So
The sidewalk that gets the most use, I believe you'll find, is at the bank side, not the
Over here.
Chimbrook side.
okay. So
That
I
that
mean,
area there, yeah.
is there a need for a sidewalk on this side of the road in this location at all? right here.
A crosswalk?
I'm sorry,
Uh,
yes, a crosswalk. Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
It gets very limited use. The majority of the people along that whole side are people that are in and out of our office for the most part. Occasionally, there's some people that walk up through there from Honeywell Avenue.
So in general, I mean, I'm a proponent of minimizing the amounts of crosswalks in a certain area if I can. It concentrates pedestrians into an area that's much safer in that regard. If we could, I mean, if folks are open to removing this crosswalk, you could still get access to every point you could. You could cross still at this more heavily used crosswalk and cross Honeywell here. Crossing here is a much better alternative, obviously, than crossing Main Street. If you're trying to get up this direction. So I don't know, does that maybe answer your Heather's question or as well?
I would lean against removing that, only in that I come through out of that road every day around lunchtime there, and there are a lot of folks that go across just to walk up a couple doors to stop in to pop on over to grab their lunch, that come from whether it's the bank or it's our Chimbrow Institute or the lower side of our building, or walking up the road. It seems like they'd end up crossing multiple crosswalks and moving away from their target to go back up to hit the restaurants to grab takeout or something.
Gotcha.
I personally,
could look at-
I wouldn't go away from it.
Okay. We could look too at I mean, if having that connection to that park area is important. I mean, we could look at shifting this up the road a little, up this direction further. I want to get it separated from the intersection. If you're going to move it from the intersection, it's got to be a ways away from the intersection. That's kind of the kick, the trade-off there. So
There must be some standards out there that talk about that, right, in design?
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
very dependent on each situation, unfortunately.
yeah, right. And the amount of traffic and
Yep.
And that whole thing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I would just add that, I have seen that your sidewalk that is adjacent to the Chimbrow parking lot being used more than the one to the Bangor Savings Bank lot coming
Okay.
from the Rennie's department store. Pedestrian, actually, I see more people crossing on that upward, that to the right of your screen, more than crossing the road that way than down the other way. But just in my travels and living here in the municipality.
Yep. So they didn't actually pick up a crosswalk in the survey on this side. Is there actually a crosswalk crossing Main Street right here? There is. Okay. It showed one striped in the Google Street View, but that was 2011. So I don't know what kind of shape it's in. But. Okay. So I guess then, I don't want to miss Heather's point relative to kind of this tie-in here. I mean, we're not too far away from it for sure, as related to this crosswalk, but I think it's proximate enough to that intersection that it will be probably problematic to actually relocate the crosswalk up here. The problem, what happens is if you're a driver kind of coming to this intersection, you're not focused on a crosswalk here. You're focused on the intersection. So you run the risk of some potential conflicts at that pedestrian location. But.
Good point. Very good point.
Okay. So I think, I think it makes sense. There's a lot of different materials we could use, and I think, aesthetics are certainly important. Probably above many others here in this instance. So it does make sense to build in several alternates, I think, into this into the bid that we do for this, so that we can then kind of decide. At least then we have have prices in mind and can make a better informed decision at that time. That would be how I would propose to do it. I think we would look at probably doing a concrete basic concrete. We could look at pavers, and we could look at maybe stamped concrete or something. Provide some different options. Is anybody even considering a paved sidewalk for this? Is that even worth pricing out? Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
No, yeah, no.
Excellent. Okay. I had to ask, so.
Well,
Alrighty.
Brent, did you say pavement? Brent Newhouse, is he still on?
Yeah, I did, but, I don't know how, this is budget driven. I don't know. I mean, it all comes
Yeah.
in on cost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's worth exploring to see, okay, this is the price to have it paved, and this is how much more it is to do concrete. I obviously prefer concrete, but,
Yep. I mean, we can certainly make, pavement be the base bid and have several alternates for that.
I think
price it out.
that makes sense. Yeah.
You better plan on putting concrete aprons at every door.
That's the kicker, right? I mean, you've got, there's a lot of, there's certainly a lot of inherent downfalls with paving sidewalks there, especially in an instance like this. I haven't priced one of these out in a year or so, and we all know what's happened with pricing lately, but yes, concrete costs more, but you also got to look at life cycle cost, not just upfront cost too. So
For sure. 40 years is a long time,
absolutely.
for some of us anyway.
So
Question for you. In terms of the curbing that you've referenced, that's all granite on both sides of the road, what's the current reveal on that curbing? Do you have anybody have any sense of what that is? Because it appears to me that the street might have been paved more than once.
yeah, I would say it varies from, at least, and this is, keep in mind, this is 2011, so who knows, it may have been surfaced since then too, but you're at virtually no reveal on the bump out here. And you get down to, 4 inches maybe, just by
The
eyeball.
delivery trucks running over that for 40 years has driven that down too a little.
Oh, that's true, probably too, yeah. So another thing we can look at doing, sorry to interrupt, Peter, is we could consider a different type of curbing on the bump outs too, to accommodate delivery vehicles or plow trucks and things like that. But go ahead.
So in regard to the reveal on the granite, what is the intent of the state in terms of paving that would further make that issue worse in terms of the reveal? And do they have an intention of grinding the asphalt along that edge? Do we know that?
Yeah, so what you're seeing here, Peter, is that the dash lines here are the existing contours, and the solid lines are the DOT's proposed contours. You can see it's definitely, they're looking to mill down in this bump out location. Looking to see if these are 1-footers or 2-footers. Or 1-footers. So they're coming down maybe 4 inches or so. Just total eyeball here, but they are coming down some for sure in these locations. We'll need to coordinate certainly with the DOT's engineer to get that figured out, but there may be an instance here where we end up, we need to be, we need to obviously have positive drainage out, but we may be able to regrade these sidewalks, excuse me, to get to a point where we can get to this reveal without messing with Main Street too much. Sort of rebuild that reveal by, we need obviously positive drainage out. I can't exceed 2% across for ADA purposes. But maybe maybe we can make this grade a little shallower, to get that reveal back. I don't want to go too shallow, obviously. Certainly really good drainage away from these buildings is imperative.
Right.
I just had a thought, if I may. Can I You know, those raised travelways that you see on the roundabouts that the state's been using. I know getting away from the granite curb on that bump out right there. I know that probably everybody would be right on needing that aesthetic look with the curbing, but you know, if Rennie's I know that Rennie uses that bump out as a place to put their truck, to unload their trucks. You know, those raised concrete on those roundabouts, in the center of those roundabouts seem to be, you know, they must hold up well if they're being used on roundabouts. You know, that's the only place I can think of. I mean, basically it's just a design of a concrete with a slope curb on it that match into the pavement. But that was just a thought.
Yeah, you could definitely, you can certainly do mountable curbs, slope curbing in that area. I don't know if I guess that's another question. Is that something you want to promote? Do you want to have that be sort of a delivery area, or would you prefer
That's the
that to be?
problem.
That's right, you're inviting
It encourages
to drive on it.
mountable curbing
I
encourages
think it's
people
a
to drive on
dangerous
it,
area.
which accelerates your wear and tear and your cracking and your maintenance. And I would discourage that as much as Paul. Rennies shouldn't be parking there. They always have, but they shouldn't be, right? That's why that's as beat up as it is.
Right.
They probably shouldn't have it as a as a place to put all their stuff they're trying to sell either. I mean, that's not really a great curb appeal, I don't think.
Well,
Not their personal sidewalk.
seems like that's been going on for quite a while.
Doesn't make
Well,
it.
it probably is, unfortunately. It's a great little store for Maine, or Pittsfield and Maine for that matter.
Yeah.
The challenge is if you go back on the back entrance, there's a set of stairs there to get up onto the main floor. And I think you'll find that the reason why they're doing that on the front is it's straight in to the floor without climbing a set of stairs for everything that goes in that store. Now, they're pretty good people. And I think if somebody made reference to this issue, that they would do everything they can to comply and recognize how important it is to perhaps not drive their trucks up onto the sidewalk. And that's currently what they're doing, I believe.
Yeah, resetting that curb and increasing the reveal would, it would really discourage that, and they'd probably comply easily.
Well, I think it might take a little bit more than that. I think you might going into the planters or benches or something there to change that would probably really discourage them, but that's just my thought.
I think they're very reasonable people, and if somebody chatted with them, I think you'd find that they'd comply.
Yep. So.
Is there a way to open that up a little bit more? Looking at your photo there, there's actually a street light right next to the traffic light. Is there a way to incorporate those all on one post? And that would clean up the area a little bit and not be so congested. It might leave space to have a planter or a bench or something.
Yeah, I think we could certainly look at options there.
To kind of close up that section where people can still walk through it, but trucks can't drive on.
Yep.
There is space. They can park down in front of the theater building or even up on the other side. It's a little bit further for them to go, obviously, and not ideal from their perspective to be able to unload, but it would certainly make it look a little bit better than having a lot of things in that small area.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think we can certainly, I see no issue necessarily consolidating some of that. And, streetlights are certainly another piece of this whole puzzle. So I think you're absolutely right. Wherever we can consolidate posts, the better off we're going to be here. I guess one thing to talk about too, I mean, what is the winter condition of these bump outs? I mean, are these entirely plowed, or do you have like, how is this function in the winter, I guess?
They're cleaned off in the winter.
They are, okay.
One of the problems that I've observed in the wintertime is the town has a tendency of running their heavy equipment right up onto the sidewalks and getting everything they can.
Okay.
And I think you'll find that some of that has an impact on the life of material there. These sidewalks are not built or designed to take a load of a front end loader. And,
Okay.
and I think that what you'll find is that's happened over a period of years for a very long time. And I think that's why we're seeing a depression in the profile of that curbing in places.
I think that's a great point, Peter. It you know, certainly these are built to a different standard than the main road. There's no question. So it is important too. And I think certainly restoring that reveal will help with that. Although a curb isn't going to stop a front end loader, that's really a practice, that you may want to look at altering. What does the town have for sidewalk removal or sidewalk snow removal equipment?
This will definitely be an item that'll have to be looked at. They've always run the equipment over this entire area, which is part of the reason why over a 25-year period, the first 25 years, it got damaged quite a bit. And then there's been damage since then too. So that's definitely would be looked at. If we're going to redo the entire downtown area with the roadway and then the sidewalks, we'll have to look at what equipment is going to be needed to do this properly, because we don't want to damage it. This will be what we will have for the next 40 or 50 years.
Right, and I can identify at least 2 catch basins that abut the granite curbing. And one at the corner of Easy Street and Main Street as an example, where the catch basin, which abuts the granite, has been collapsed as a result of running a loader right up on that sidewalk and that curbing. And it's been that way for a period of time, and I can remember the incident. And so these sidewalks are not designed or built for heavy equipment. And when I say heavy equipment, I don't, the town has some decent equipment to do the sidewalks and blower and all of those kind of things. And as long as they do that prior to the plow, maybe, and the cleanup out on the street, it would benefit the condition of those sidewalks and these bump outs.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think there's definitely a practice, maintenance practice discussion that needs to happen as well here for sure. Obviously, you don't want to build this and then have it destroyed in 10 years by a front end loader. So
in anticipation of the project, there would be a maintenance plan that would be put together. It's obvious that it needs to be done so that the sidewalks aren't damaged in the beginning like they were when the other ones were put in, back 40, 45 years ago. So yes, definitely maintenance plan for downtown.
Okay. All right. I'm going to skip real quickly over to some other materials here. What about lighting? I mean, what are folks' thoughts there? I mean, you could go sort of rustic, with the lantern look. You could go modern styles. I guess what are your feels here?
If I could, there's going to be an electrical component to these lights. There are electrical problems near these sidewalks. If we're going to talk about lights, we got to talk about electricity. We got to talk about conduit and electrical volts where these connections are made. And there have been some issues in recent years with that system. I don't know the specifics, but I do know that it was very challenging for a period of time.
Okay.
Until it was corrected. And so that needs to be examined and evaluated and corrected. I think if the town manager, you might have some more insight on that specific issue, because I believe that there's not a permanent fix, but a temporary fix that was corrected so that we didn't have a dark Main Street. And at the same time, I think you'll find that these light poles are very inexpensive and very light. And I think that could be or has been part of the problem. And I think that a high quality pole, not a light metal pole like these are, and in particular the base, needs to be built to last 40 years or 50 or more.
Absolutely. Yep.
So when we say lights for the project, it also includes the conduit that runs under the sidewalk and the electrical components too. Yes.
I hope so, Catherine. I hope so.
Going to have to.
No, it's worth discussing. I mean, you know, if it was simple, if it was all functioning correctly, it wouldn't necessarily be a requirement, Catherine, to, you know, rerun all the conduit and everything like that if it was in good working order. But you know, if there are problems, it probably does, it certainly does make sense to rectify that now. I mean, you're not going to get a better opportunity to dig in there. So
No, we need to look at this definitely.
Yeah, I agree, Chip. And as Pete was saying, you may want to consider putting extra pull boxes in, extra conduit, you know, to have a duct bank for a future, for those lights, or if you want to put one of those crosswalk indicators, you know, with a flash, that type of thing.
conduit's cheap, right?
Yeah, especially before you pave.
Yep.
Yeah.
You want room to expand in general. You may want power to a planter location or to a bench location, or
Well, that's
It's
right.
always nice to have outlets for Christmas lights and things like that as well, you know.
So that's where you can start spending money where there's stuff you don't see.
Exactly.
Then you get to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
in
Mark,
general, just a light study in general. The more lighting, I think, is going to be a minimum, right? There's a lot of dark spots going up through there now.
Okay.
I don't think it's just the age. I think it's the count or the height of the lights and just the spread of the lumens.
Okay.
Yep, you brought up something that I thought was really important as far as being able to put like Christmas lights on there or something. In addition to that, there's the banners. We have these lovely banners for our bicentennial. We have some flags that we put up. They can't go in all the locations because the poles aren't really high enough. So having taller street lights would certainly help kind of cast those lumens out a little bit further. But definitely, I think we should certainly have the LEDs for efficiency, as well as having retaining that old time feel in some way, whether it's like a double light that kind of like hooks off to either side, like a shepherd's hook type thing, or something more like the one that's there now, but just definitely something taller and something that can be a little bit more versatile.
Okay.
Mhm.
Are there any, I guess, strict lighting ordinances, things like that the town has that, you know, we ought to be looking at as well? Or, I mean, I imagine we want cutoff lights and things like that, obviously, but we still want to provide safe lighting along the sidewalk here. So,
Yeah, I think that we're all set. I'll check, but I don't think there's anything that would prohibit any of the items that you talked about.
I mean, typically that applies more to sites and things like that, not necessarily streets, but worth a discussion. Okay. What else did I have here?
Landscaping and benches, which we've hit a little bit.
Yeah. The other thing to think about too is there may be, depending on the grades here, I guess before I get into too much more of this, there may be instances, depending on the grades at which DOT sets that road, there may be instances where we are actually, or we actually have to go steeper. We actually have to have a small section that is maybe not considered sidewalk, right? If we have, for instance, in this photo, let's say that this drops further than we need it to, we can only go at 2% across the sidewalk. So if we can't make up that grade difference, we may have a section out here that becomes kind of like an esplanade or something. I'm gonna try to avoid that if at all possible. It wouldn't be like, I wouldn't envision it being a grassed type esplanade, maybe just something that's sloped off harder at the end, but I don't like that for a number of reasons. Just safety, it just looks bad, frankly. But something to keep in mind that we are gonna have to work around potentially in certain areas. I think the DOT, we brought that to their engineers' concern early on, and I think that they rectified that. We haven't gotten deep enough into to go through that. I think they picked it up in some areas to help us with that. So just, I guess, throwing it out there as a placeholder, just in case we kind of get into that discussion again, potential for maybe some esplanades or something to take care of that. But beyond that, I guess, I mean, plantings, furniture type stuff for, benches, things like that. I assume that's all stuff folks are probably interested, just based on kind of reading the room here, so to speak. Okay. Any materials for that folks are feeling more towards? Are we like in wood or, steel type structures? Wood?
I think overall, we're a rustic feel kind of town. I
Yeah.
would stay towards the, I would stay towards the rustic.
Yep.
Lighting, furniture, the woods, the decorative metals, if any.
If we're talking about benches, they're going to need to be removed seasonally. And so they're going to be kind of carted around and pick up trucks to get them moved and offsite to be stored. So, I mean, we kind of have to think about how portable they're going to be and how durable they're going to be. I would prefer to sit on a wooden bench rather than a steel bench. But at the same time, a steel bench is going to last longer and stand up better to having work crews pick them up and move them at least twice a year, as well as being able to be stored outside, because we don't really have a covered area for storing stuff like this right now. So, I mean, I would prefer wood just because it has a more welcoming feel and look to it, a little bit warmer, and not so hot to sit on in the middle of the summer as a metal bench, and maybe some type of combination bench. But it certainly needs to be something that's going to be durable if we're going to be investing in benches or something like that.
Sure.
Or maybe we can think about something more permanent that wouldn't be moved, like a stone bench or something like that, that would be fixed, but then we have to work around snow removal and things like that. But at least with a stone bench, you don't run the risk of vandalism or damage quite as much.
Are those kinds of things eligible for this funding when we start talking about furniture?
So the furniture is not part of the grant, but we have some other funds and grants that we've applied for. So I have some little amounts of money for bike pedestrian items, for a couple of benches, and depending on how much we want, and once we figure out our plan, we'll go out and apply for some other funding too.
Catherine, you also have bike racks?
I have a bike rack funding, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's nothing, that sort of stuff certainly doesn't really go in my bid package necessarily. It's really, again, just kind of getting the discussion going for everybody here. It really helps. I think getting that, having that discussion, and it also helps me sort of understand more about what this ultimately looks like. So
I think if we were to do something like stone benches or something, we would certainly have the potential to do a community fund drive for that. And that, you could either have them engraved or put plaques on them or something if people were to do donations in honor of someone or something like that, then there's an opportunity for that to create some ownership of the downtown area with the community members.
Well said.
Heather has a good point. I'm sure that once we determine what we want to have in the downtown, we'll be able to raise funds for it, apply for grants and get donations. We've done a lot of community projects over the years and people come out in force to work on them.
Okay. Um, Is there anything else that folks wanted to bring up in this?
Yeah, I've got a
Well,
question.
yeah.
Yeah, Chip, and again, it's materials you don't see, and I don't know if this falls in your scope or not, if it's under DOT. I saw in your plan view, existing water, existing sewer mains, but no services coming off that into the buildings.
Mhm.
Are the services good to go?
Unfortunately, that is out of my scope. I guess, I mean, nothing I'm doing is deep enough that's gonna, conflict with those.
I understand,
I-
but I'd hate to see putting a new sidewalk in, and the next thing you know, you're digging up a sidewalk to put a new sewer in. Or a
Well,
new-
certainly,
new water.
yeah, absolutely. Certainly a great point.
Because I know there's two houses up the street that, you know, they're gonna be worked into this somehow because they have sewer issues and they need to cross Main Street, Route 100.
Yep. Yeah, I suppose it's probably prudent to maybe do some investigations of, the conditions of those services. Ultimately, it's not necessarily a cost thing, but it would be unfortunate to build this thing and have to have some cuts in a brand new sidewalk,
That's
obviously.
right, yeah.
So, that certainly is an added, it's more of a risk mitigation on the town's front to do that now. Than anything, I guess it's certainly up for discussion.
I mean, sewer lines can be TV, right? To make sure they're
TV,
good.
TV,
Right.
sewer lines, water's a
Yeah.
little tougher, obviously.
Right, water's an issue, but sewer lines should be looked at.
Yep, storm drain,
Yeah.
if you got
Yeah,
foundation drains.
and was TV camered, and we've talked to all of our associates about going back to look at the flow studies that were done and see what else will need to be done. So Brent, off this call, you can give me the names of the places that have the issues, and so we can have those double checked.
No, Catherine, what I'm asking is that make sure this is all good. We're just talking about Main Street right now, and we just want to make sure that's good. I mean, it'd be a shame to not do, due diligence to make sure they're good to go. And then, next thing you know, you're cutting the new sidewalk, a new roadway up to fix the sewer line.
All
And the
right.
sewer line on the other side of the road.
So on the two places that you mentioned that there's an issue, we'll need to know what those are. And I had noted, and it may be just by the way the conversation goes with cutting in and out, that we have all of our associates looking at the sewer flow study to see exactly what's going on the at least the sewer part.
Yeah.
And then can look at some other items that are brought up too. Good point.
Catherine, I think the point too, there's a number of businesses obviously along this entire Main Street corridor in downtown that all of them are hooked in to sewer, water, and likely storm drain, and crossing the sidewalk. So it may be worth considering, investigating all of those.
And the way I understand that is that the property owner owns from their property to the sewer main or the water main. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yep.
Yeah.
So
That's
it
good.
wouldn't, it's not a cost. I mean, if there was an issue with the service, it's not necessarily on the, I'm sorry, I should say, at least for water, I think they own it to the curb stop at least. But so that replacement wouldn't be on the town. It's just the unfortunate byproduct of having to rip up the sidewalk to do it.
I mean, that's gonna be a question for the DOT as well. I mean, are there any contingencies for replacing these sewer lines if they need to be replaced?
Yep.
And who pays for it?
Brent, it's my understanding that the state, not this year, but within the last 2 years, we're evaluating all of the structures, the main lines. And if I'm not mistaken, they were evaluating some of the connections and the feeds. And it gets very serious when we get up to Manson Street and that whole vicinity has been problematic over the years.
Yes.
And not good, because if I'm not mistaken, the line comes down across Manson Street, crosses Main Street, and goes between what was the Shorey house and the Stein house, somewhere in that vicinity. I'm just speaking from memory now, but it's been a problem in the past. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Frank Whitworth corrected some of that. One of your team members might have that memory.
We're going way back, Pete. And it's just a concern, a thought. I just wanted to bring it up and make sure. I know we're just talking about Main Street right now with, on the actual Main Street where the sidewalk is, but.
But I think to Pete's point, I mean, it's very likely if the DOT is in fact looking at doing work in that, on that sewer main, that they likely have done some due diligence on at least the locations of those services and hopefully condition. That's certainly not uncommon when you're doing
Right.
utility work like that. So.
Right.
So we'll follow up on that. We did talk to all of our associates about this overall issue, and looking back over the records and the camera work that had been done and whether additional camera work should be done. But we will check with DOT on what they have for records. Is that something that you can do, Chip?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep, very good. So we'll write that down. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, concerns, questions?
All right. Any last minute comments? We got pages and pages of good comments here on items to look at, enhancements for the downtown, and this, along with the road work that Maine DOT is going to do, will transform our entire downtown. So it's a extremely important project, and we need to get it right. So this is all very, very good information.
So I have one question for Chip. And within recent days, and I've shared this with Catherine, within recent days, I've had conversation with Heather at the DECD and the commissioner, and that's all in relationship to broadband in Pittsfield. There's funding at the state level through the DECD for broadband, and as I understand it, broadband would essentially go in the street. And I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty confident that that is the case. I'm assuming it would go in the street. Am I to assume, and you may want to have that conversation with the Department of Transportation to verify that, would it go in the street or would it go on a sidewalk? And why I'm saying sidewalk is, again, you need to connect, right? And again, if you connect, where would the best place to be? And certainly, for the most part, the best place to connect would be under a sidewalk, perhaps. I don't know that. And I don't know if bolts are installed or how this all works. But if in fact, this town wants broadband, and there could be a benefit to that, this is the time to be dealing with it and defining how we're going to approach that issue.
Pete, if it's, I looked into the program there and they do have the cost funding. At the moment, they don't have the grant program open. It closed back in October, I think. They might be opening it up again this fall for applications, but it seems like the timing of our project is not going to mesh up to being able to participate in a grant project. And we haven't really, the town's not in a position to have funding for a project of this size right now. So does this fall into one of those things that we could put an extra conduit in the ground in preparation of future
I-
issues?
Yeah, I talked to Heather yesterday about a variety of things that are state related. She brought it to my attention and suggested that the town of Pittsfield, and she was talking about now, currently, should apply for funding that the state has. And if I'm not mistaken, either they're confident or they have funding that will come as a result of the stimulus. I don't know what the terms are. I shared that with Catherine yesterday after she brought it to my attention. And so I think we need to ask the question again, because it appears to me she wouldn't have suggested that to me if they didn't have any money currently.
Mhm.
Well, that sounds encouraging.
I did ask the question again to DECD, and they've sent me to Connect Maine and have somebody that's going to call back, the person in charge of the program, who I know. So we'll talk about that. It may be coming through the stimulus. It doesn't appear to be on their website now under their current programs, as Heather has said, but there is money coming to the state of Maine, so this might be a good opportunity. So we'll get ourselves into the mix here and see what would be available. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. And on my end, I need to look into, I'm not familiar with the installation, I guess, requirements of that. I'm assuming most of that is subsurface, but I don't know if there's, antennas or things like that that need to be installed. I'll look into that to see what's included in that.
And this really doesn't affect our company, but it's my understanding that it's very attractive to certain other entities that use broadband or need it. And it's just one of those things that a lot of communities or businesses are complaining about because they don't have that connectivity. And that's just one other tool that we have in attracting an entity to the town of Pittsfield to be able to say we have broadband.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're gonna take all this information and try to distill this down into, sort of the next phase here, which really is going to be delving into some concepts. What this might look like. Realistically, I don't see too many configuration changes from what we talked about today. Maybe that middle bump out shifts a little bit. Maybe soften the radius on this one or something. See what we can do for truck traffic's making that movement. That's a potential. But I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I think from a configuration standpoint, I think what you've got for the most part makes sense in that regard. And then realistically, then I think we need to look at what I'll come back with is maybe some different options for the materials, whether it's some photos and things like that we could look at. But I think realistically, once we have the kind of the configuration and the overall layout down, then it really just comes down to materials. And like we said, I don't know is really we're in a position to make a final decision until we get pricing on a lot of that. So getting the pricing for all the different options at that point is when we make that decision, I think. So unfortunately, that won't be for a year and a half or so.
But in terms of getting ready, when do we think we'll have some information just estimating ready for the town council and for interested parties?
Are you saying for construction costs, Catherine?
Yes, and concepts.
Yeah, so I think DOT had asked for some concepts from us for April. I think we can still hit. We should still be able to pull together some concept plans. No problem there. So I think you'll have some sort of concept plans to share with interested parties at some point in April. I haven't yet started to look at the actual calendar here, but and and along with that, I could put together a very rough kind of cost estimate for that. You know, that I'll have to include, you know, certain allowances maybe for electrical and things like that. That's really some of this is a bit unknown relative to current conditions here. So I think we'll have to make some pretty hefty assumptions at this point.
Mhm. All right, very good. Anybody have anything else? We really appreciate the input. As we've noted, this is a very important project for the downtown. It will really transform our downtown into a nice economic development project here that we'll be proud of. All right, great.
Well done, Chip. Well done.
Thank you all for attending. I very much appreciate the insight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice evening.